not having a period is basically a semi-menopausal state.
It certainly seems like there is a younger and younger age. Women are going through menopause.
Women go crazy in perimenopause and menopause, and yet we're told suffer through it. Like it's part of aging to not feel like yourself, not look like yourself. We know we pass down the microbiome to our babies, and when you are not healthy in terms of you maybe have leaky gut, you have a lot of food sensitivities, you're constipated, or you're dealing with diarrhea, we know that those bacterial levels that are imbalanced can cause inflammation, which then make the body immunologically more reactive. And you don't want to go into a pregnancy without optimal of health as possible, because a pregnancy itself is really stressful on the body. I think the other big thing that just can't be ignored is our exposure to stress and toxicity in the world. Being healthy is a lot harder these days than it used to be. Hopefully now things and tides start to turn a little bit.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Gut Check podcast. Today, I am joined by Becca Chilczenkowski, who is also known as the Hormone Queen. We are talking about all things women's health, hormones through menopause, perimenopause. We talk about HRT and some of the changes recently that HHS has announced, and so much more. I think you're going to enjoy this conversation. I certainly loved getting to know Becca. And as always, let us know what you think. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Gut Check podcast. Today, I am joined by Becca Chilczenkowski, aka the Hormone Queen. Thank you so much for being with us, Becca.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat.
So let's just dive in. I think a great place to start is your background. As I understand, you left the corporate world to start what you're doing now. So, what
Yeah.
inspired the transition and what led you to what you're doing right now?
Um, I was bored out of my mind sitting in meetings. So I used to do analyst work. It was actuarial work for Allstate Insurance. And it was, I joke that I have two little kids and I'm like, I don't know if I want them going to college
Mm-hmm.
right after high school because I had no idea what I wanted to do when I was 18 years old. And so I just went into, an economy major, which I felt like could be broad reaching when I got out of college, but then I found CrossFit after
Cool.
college. I was a two-sport athlete in college, and so I kind of had this like competitive nature to me, and I needed to fuel it after college. And I found CrossFit, and then became obsessed, which I tend to do. I'm a little bit of an extremist, and so I went all in. I did the paleo diet. I was eating chicken and broccoli and sweet potatoes for every meal, and I wanted to study nutrition and learn everything about it and compete in it. And so I wanted to leave work as soon as I could to go to the gym, and became very bored in meetings, and to the point where I was like falling asleep in meetings at
Mm-hmm.
work and I just could not be engaged. And so I then made it my goal to get my certification in CrossFit coaching and
Cool.
be able to make it a full-time job. So then I did. And that's how I
Cool.
ended up in a CrossFit gym managing it, which also then led me down the path of a lot of stress on my body from
Mhm.
training, and ultimately what kind of led me to my demise,
Yeah.
which then led me to here and learning about how hormones impact your health.
It's so interesting. I mean, your story is one that we hear a lot, right? Where so much of, the experts and the specialists that we're talking to online and that, have started their own businesses have just come out of a personal journey and just said, man, I really need to help other people. And the reality is there's a lot of people to help, right? I mean, we are a very sick country right now. What were some of the things? So you go into intense training, you'd already been an athlete before, but specifically, for women's and hormone health in general, what were some of the things that you learned through your journey of maybe how you were damaging your hormones and damaging your health through the intense training?
Yeah. So if I don't know how much you know about CrossFit, but CrossFit
Yep.
is, being the strongest, fittest, but also leanest and
Yeah.
able to move your body. I'm 5'9". I'm not a CrossFit body type.
Yeah.
Um, Gymnasts tend to be a lot better at CrossFit because they're
Yeah.
smaller, they're shorter movement patterns, you pull less distance on a pull-up
Yeah.
bar, right? And so for me to be good at the level that I wanted to be, um, I in my mind was like, all these women have abs that are at the top
Mm.
level. So like that's what I'm working towards, right? So I was training at my peak twice a day, 5 days a week.
Yeah.
And other time during the day I was coaching. So I was moving on my feet, helping, help people with lifting. And so I was constantly moving. And looking back on it now, I was like, God, I was probably burning excessive amounts of calories.
Yeah.
I was working with a macro coach, but at the time I probably was only eating like 2,400, 2,600 calories a day for someone that's training that much, not enough still.
Yeah.
I got down to about 9% body fat. I was on birth control at the time, but I lost my period for 3 years. And so
Wow.
big red flags, right?
This
That I,
was before kids?
yes,
Okay.
yeah. Hence why I went through IVF to have my first child.
Okay.
But looking back on it now, like I was very gassy.
Mhm.
I would drink like an intra workout shake of protein powder and Gatorade powder for like glucose. But I was so gassy during my
Yeah.
workouts. Like I didn't want to be around me in the
Yeah.
gym. It was bad. I was relatively constipated. I was really moody. So this is
Uh,
one that I look back now and I'm like, oh my gosh, my poor husband, he would deal with
yeah.
me if I would come home and like didn't have a good workout or training didn't go well that day. I didn't want to talk. I snapped a lot easier, like big blowouts in terms of my
Yeah.
mood. And then I got to the point, which kind of fast forwarding a little bit, I started gaining weight rapidly.
Uh,
When I wasn't really changing calories, I was exercising the same. That was after my competitive years and after I had my first kid. But um, those were probably the biggest red flags. Like, obviously, not having
yeah.
a cycle for multiple years is probably something I should have paid attention to.
Yeah.
I wasn't sleeping very well. I was exhausted all the time. And then my mood was just so unstable. So for me, those were the biggest ones.
There's a lot of reasons why women lose their cycles, right? And just talking about that for a moment because it's so important. I mean, it's a vital sign of women's health, right? And again, it's not something that we really learn or do a great job in teaching young women. I have a daughter now, another one that's due any day, and I'm hopeful that
Oh,
I do a much better job communicating to them because it's not for a lack of care, but the education that you get is just kind of not there with talking about cycle health. And so there's a lot of women that lose it. You mentioned gymnasts. There's a lot of kind of intense athletes, right, that lose their period. And I'm curious, I mean, from your perspective, looking back on it as someone who didn't have your period for 3 years because of probably the intensity and the stress that your body was under and the training, what would you say to a young woman, right, who maybe is under that kind of stress and loses her period? I mean, what's the advice that you would give if that's something that they go through? Because I think it's more common than we would even know.
yeah, and like the irregularity too,
Yeah.
right? With PCOS,
Yep.
a lot of women have 2 cycles a year, right?
Yeah.
And so for me and for anyone, it varies.
Mhm.
Some people can be 12, 13% body fat and still have a cycle.
Mhm.
Other women lose their cycle at like 16, 17% body fat or 20% body fat. And I think a lot of it has to do with that person's kind of set point with their homeostasis in the body, how their body perceives stress, the type of stress that the body's under. Mine was very physical, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I was probably creating a lot of mental stress in terms of putting myself under a lot of pressure and things of that nature. But then the other thing that I notice is that once something really stressful to the body happens, there's kind of a level of PTSD that the body has. Like it becomes very easily triggered again, comparatively to the first time that it
Yeah.
happened. And so for people that have lost a cycle, some things that I would look into is what's bringing you stress in your day, right? Is it physical? Are you eating enough? Do you even know how much you're eating? Are you fueling your body with good foods? And then I look to the mental emotional side. And that piece, our body has perceived stresses. They don't have to be real stressors. They can be something that you create in your mind of this person doesn't like me. What am I going to do now? Am I going to lose my job? Am I going to lose my boyfriend? Like whatever it might be, to where your body can experience that stress as if it was an actual stress. And
Yeah.
so I really try to look to not only the physical, which tends to narrow down to like, are you overtraining? Are you under eating for your activity level? Are there not enough carbohydrates, healthy carbohydrates for the body? Because females are a lot more sensitive to things like that. And then
Yeah.
the other piece is mental emotional. And what are you doing in your day that maybe is creating a lot more trauma or stress to the body than you may realize?
And I mean, on like the exercising piece, I mean, at least for me, I was definitely one of the ones like fasted, would go work out. I never got into CrossFit. I'm even taller than you. I'm 5'10". So because I saw that, I was like, oh, this is like a gymnast kind of body fit thing. But would go, running a lot of all kinds of different things, boxing, and would do it, probably in like way too much of a deficit. And I started to learn more about my hormones, but for a while it was just kind of the whole like calories in, calories out. And I think that's a lot of kind of the very surface level when a place that a lot of women are at with all of these different issues. Like we're seeing PCOS and all this insulin resistance and stuff. You can't just be thinking about calories in, calories out, right? There's so much more to it. So be curious, when did you first have kind of, I'm gonna say the click of, oh, there's something more here to why I'm gaining weight right after a kid and everything else. This isn't just about calories. It's not just about macros. There's a lot more to this.
Yeah, so my career in CrossFit kind of ended abruptly. I was training for actually the CrossFit Games. I had qualified post regionals and was training for kind of like the big show, and I ruptured my Achilles. So I had like a pretty anyone that knows what it's an awful injury.
Mhm.
It's terrifying. It takes a very long time to come back from, and so I knew at that point I was like, I'm probably not going to come back from this in terms of to the level of competing that I was at. And my
Mhm.
husband and I wanted to start a family at the time, and so I didn't have a period, and it kind of fast tracked us to IVF. And
Mm.
I was fortunate. I was able to get pregnant with, I had multiple transfers that were successful and eggs that fertilized fully. And so we had great egg quality and we were able to transfer one and have a healthy pregnancy with the first IVF round that we did. But after I had my kid, I also was kind of growing my business within the gym at the time. I was doing a lot of macro coaching and healthy eating, kind of like autoimmune protocol type diet for
Yep.
6 weeks for people. Um, and I wanted to get back into having the body that I had prior to my kid.
Yeah.
And so I went to what worked for me at first, and that was CrossFit, and that was training hard and training a lot. And it worked for about a year. I had gained about 45 pounds with my pregnancy and I had lost it. I had gotten back to a place where I felt comfortable. But at the same token, I was exhausted. I was not
Mhm.
sleeping enough. I was now had the added stressor of like my business is growing. I have a kid. I'm
Yeah.
trying to train the same like I did when I didn't have a kid or a business that was growing. And there was about a 3 to 4 week period where there were signs leading up to it. I was constipated more. I was bloated. I was exhausted. I was moody again. I was going to doctors and getting blood work, and nothing was really showing abnormal to them. But there was about a 3 to 4 week span where I gained about 15 pounds pretty rapidly.
Whoa.
I couldn't control it. I was eating even less. I was working out more or moving more. And every time I stepped on the scale, it just kept going up. And when I look back at the time and the pictures, like, it was like someone pumped water into my body. Like, you don't gain fat that fast. It
Yeah.
doesn't happen. But you can swell that fast.
Mhm.
And that was like the point for me where I hit rock bottom and I was like, something has to happen. I need to figure out what's going on because in the same breath, I was working with a lot of women and a lot of people would respond to calorie deficits. Like a lot of the people in the 6 week program I was doing and the, nutrition coaching would respond. But there was kind of this subset of women that were in their late 30s, 40s, early 50s that like just did not respond to calorie
Mhm.
deficits. And so I not only couldn't help myself in this moment, but like I had no answers for these women. They were eating
Yeah.
what I was telling them to eat, they were doing what I was telling them to do, and their
Yeah.
body was not responding. And so that was the biggest red flag for me of what's happening. Why
Right.
can't I control it? Why is calories in, calories out not working? And that's where I kind of took it upon myself to educate, find mentors, find people that knew what was I was experiencing, had worked with what I was experiencing, and
Yeah.
those have become now, lifelong mentors and friends. And now I help women kind of with what I was going through.
Well, and it's so interesting that you brought up that age difference as well, because I do think maybe the 20s, 30s, and the 30s start to get a little dicey, but you can have this kind of, I don't want to say more straightforward, it's not for everyone, but by and large, this calories in, calories out, run to the deficit, whatever, and stay really thin, what happens obviously when our hormones change, and especially post children, but then also menopause, right? Is you can have women who are not eating very much at all and are really disciplined about what they're eating. And they're still not losing weight that they want to lose, whether it's 5, 10 pounds or more. And so I'm curious because I know a lot of your business right now, you guys do a lot of testing. So
Mhm.
curious on how, functional lab testing, that's still a new term for a lot of people. I mean, we've got a lot of testing, and I think all of us that kind of run in this kind of health and wellness circle are so used to talking about testing and then getting into the nuances of all the different testing. And for most people, they still are just maybe getting a blood panel every year or every couple of years, right? At best, or they haven't. So I'd love to hear, your specific take on testing and the importance for women. When should women start testing? What does that provide in addition to just looking at diet and lifestyle?
Yeah, I think it provides answers, right? If
Yeah.
you have the right critical eye looking at it, it helps you connect how you're feeling. And
Yeah.
I'm all about preventativeness. My dad, in the past 10 years has like been diagnosed with Parkinson's, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and all of these things that I feel like could have been delayed or prevented if there would have been some type of preventative care.
Um,
He worked in he owned a manufacturing factory and was
yeah.
in contact with fumes. He was waking up at 4 a.m. every day to go to the factory to make like it just the stress and the exposure level for him and his body. He
Yeah.
probably didn't have the best diet. I mean, like I know he didn't. And so
Yeah.
there's so many things that were impacting him, but that generation just was never taught to be preventative, right? It was like, listen to your doctor. If once you reach 40, you go on prostate support, you go like you get on a statin as soon as your cholesterol's over 200. Like
Mm,
it's a different world. And so I'm glad that we are now starting to experience people being more aware of
yeah.
preventative care and looking at the body as a whole. But I think everyone and anyone should get labs once a year. And they should have
Mm,
someone looking at them that has a critical eye and isn't just looking for a big red flag of disease or,
mm,
needs to be medicated or surgery. Right. And so I personally get labs every 6 months. Our clients typically get labs every 6 months. And it's crazy to me still. I don't know why, because I see it all the time, but how many women come in that aren't overweight but are chronically stressed,
mhm,
have symptoms that they've maybe been ignoring for a while, and come in are pre-diabetic. They're
mm,
working out, they're eating healthy, but their A1C is a 5.6 or a 5.7. Their insulin's a 15, right? Their vitamin D's a 20. They got all kinds of anemias or deficiency markers or immune insufficiency markers. Their white blood cells are below a 4, right? Like
mm,
they've just been dealing with things chronically. And I'll be honest, those cases are so much harder to pull out of the woods than
yeah.
someone that comes in has been overeating for 2 weeks. Like, give
Yeah.
me the overeater all day long. They are so much easier to fix than someone that has been chronically stressed, under eating, and basically running their body into the ground for years. They're
Well,
a harder
and
case.
and that I think unfortunately is so much of women dealing with things mentally, right? It's just the stress that women put on themselves. And it's very interesting how that again shows up in blood work and, and is something that's, to your point, harder to change than some of the, I would say, ABCs of lifestyle intervention, but those fundamentals of lifestyle intervention at least are I don't want to say easier. It's all hard, but it's a lot more straightforward than it is to say, hey, stop being stressed about being stressed, right? I mean, that's a psychological barrier that I think unfortunately women also have a lot more than men because of the pressure that women put on themselves. The other thing that you'll hear a lot is that women will go in, get labs done, and the labs will be quote unquote normal, right? You're normal, it's fine. And I'm talking kind of more of the standard primary care physician saying this, and they still feel awful, right? So I don't know if there's, a flaw or something that you've noticed after doing this for so long, that, kind of standard blood work, from a regular doctor. What are some of the call outs that you should be aware of if you are getting blood work done?
Ugh, I get so angry. I actually, every time someone says to me on my DMs, like, my doctor told me my labs were normal, I'm like, send them to me. Send them to me right now. I can show you what's not normal because doctors don't look critically at them. They look at conventional ranges, which are
Yeah.
basically if you fall within 95% of the population, you're going to fit within conventional ranges. It's based on a sick population. The ranges are getting bigger and bigger for certain things and
Mhm.
smaller for other things that they can just medicate. Total cholesterol used to be if it was over 230, maybe you consider a statin. Now it's over 200. Like they have been shrinking the ranges for people so that they can prescribe more drugs.
Wow.
It's awful. They're all in bed together. It's fine. Like at this point, it's so big that it's why I think everyone needs to go to the functional route or have,
Mhm.
find a really good conventional doctor that goes both
Mhm.
ways. But we look at things in a much tighter range because again, if someone is sick or not feeling well, which is most females, because females immune systems work very different than men's immune systems. Females immune systems deal with chronic things, men deal with acute things. That's why men drop dead of a heart attack at 48 but were never sick their entire life, whereas
Mhm.
females will live until they're 90 but be chronically unwell most of that time, right? It's
Mhm.
just we have different bodies. And so when I'm looking at blood work for a female, I want to look at a tighter range to be able to see where are things trending? Where are we starting to see problems? Because when we start to see problems, you wait 5, 10 years, they're going to turn into bigger problems. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, I talk to so many women that have brought labs that even we've done. Perfect example. I had someone that brought I had an iron panel on them. All of their iron was really high, which is a genetic variation known as hemochromatosis iron overload, right? She brought it, it was pretty acute too. And she brought it to her hematologist and he told her, this isn't bad enough. Come back when it's worse. Like those are essentially the conversations we're having to where doctors know they can't help you until it's to a point where they can medicate, surgery, or get you in a hospital. Like
Yeah.
that's the sick care we're dealing with. And so we look at tighter ranges and it's why we do
Mhm.
lab reviews for people so that we can explain, we take health history, we sit with them for an hour on a call to where I can connect the dots of, okay, you're experiencing reflux and bloating, you aren't sleeping, you have no sex drive. These are the labs that are showing us that. These are the systems that are struggling the most that we now need to support. And doctors just don't have the time to do that. Like, I don't fault doctors for it. They're not set up in a system to where they can be successful to help people. And I think it's why you see so many doctors now moving from conventional to functional because they truly do want to help. They just can't.
Well, and I think, I want to get back to that kind of changing the goalposts of testing because this is not the first time we've had this discussion on the podcast either.
Yeah.
And I'm really kind of disturbed by it in so many ways. But you're exactly right. I think there's so many well meaning doctors who get into medicine to help people. They're inspired to go into medicine. Frankly, they put themselves through hell in medical school and residency and everything else, and some of them are okay just to kind of live within the system and do the hours and see the 15 to 20 to 30 patients a day depending on what they're doing. But then a lot of them I think have since said, I got into this to help people and I can't help people, right? So let's talk about that for someone who's not aware. There's been I would say change in what's kind of common, right? Common ranges versus what's normal or healthy. And just because something is common doesn't mean it's normal. And now, because of unfortunately how sick the American population has become, obesity or being overweight is common, right? I mean, that is a common thing to be carrying extra weight that is not normal or healthy. And yet, to your point, and I think this is you're kind of getting at it in a really important way, you always have to look at the incentive structures, right? So, this is again why it's so important to work with a functional or integrative doctor when you're getting blood work done, because generally they have a much tighter range of what is acceptable or normal or where you should be. But I'd love to hear you kind of talk through that if the differences maybe between the functional ranges and what, physicians would say are the normal ranges.
Yeah, and it's hard because lab ranges vary per lab,
Right.
right? Quest and
Right.
LabCorp and any lab now, like they all have different ranges that they go by. And it's changed over time because our population has gotten sicker. Like they base them
Mhm.
off of the averages. And when it comes to hormone ranges, let me just get on a soapbox for a second. They are completely arbitrary. Like the hormone
Wow.
ranges are basically made up. And I've talked to people that have been in rooms that have decided the hormone ranges, and they're like, yeah, that sounds good. Like there is
Mhm.
no standard because we also know hormones vary so much, right?
Mhm.
And if you've ever noticed female testosterone, there is no low. You can be at 0
Mhm.
and you are not flagged. And so I just have a huge problem with how everything is set up conventionally.
Yeah.
But when we're looking at optimal ranges, we're going to identify typically a lot more chronic things that have been going on. So, for example, white blood cells. I very
Mhm.
commonly see white blood cells below a 5, which is my, optimal range. 5 to 7.5 is kind of an optimal place. And when we're getting into the 4s and the 3s, I've even seen some people in the 2s.
Mm.
Unfortunately, you've probably either been dealing with some type of gut infection that has been
Mhm.
chronic and wearing down the immune system, or you have been chronically stressed. Because I've seen it too, where there's no infection probably going on. You have just been under eating or stressing yourself so much to where your immune system is worn down. That's
Yeah.
probably one of the biggest ones. I see it a lot with thyroid because they only look at TSH. They don't look at T3 free. They don't look at T4 free. And T3 free optimal to where females are going to feel amazing is probably going to be at like a 3.5 or a
Mhm.
little bit higher. As children, we walked around with a free T3 of like a 6, 7. And
Wow.
now we're in the 2s and you don't feel good, but your TSH is a 3 and your doctor's not going to do anything about it. And
Yeah.
so there's just so many places that can be optimized. I see another one with the gut,
Mhm.
a ton of on the markers on the CBC. You're going to see anemias start to show up. You're going to see B12 folate anemias, iron deficiency anemias. We're going to see on the CMP, the globulins, the albumins, the liver enzymes, all of those start to show a lot of deficiency patterns. But again, none of those are going to be treated.
Mhm.
Like they only treat certain things when it comes to lab work in a conventional realm. And it's why they also don't test as much because guess what? Sure, I would love to see certain markers like an LDH marker or certain antibody markers, but doctors don't know what to do with them. If you have a,
Huh.
reverse T3, they don't know how to manage that if it comes back out of range. And so they just don't run it, or there's not enough qualification of, a code that they can put that justifies the reason to order that. And so you're just getting the minimum of what they can justify via insurance. Vitamin D just came off of
Yeah.
insurance. Like they're no longer serve under insurance to get vitamin D. So now typically it has to be paid out of pocket for most insurances.
What?
It just, it continues to get more and more stingy, which
Yeah.
is extremely frustrating for people that cannot afford functional
Right.
health, because a lot of
Right.
functional health is out of pocket. And it's why I try to have my platform and give as much free information as possible. And I work a
Mhm.
lot in the HRT realm, which
Yep.
you need to know what you're asking for when you go to a doctor, or else you will get put on a synthetic form or you will not get what you're asking
Right.
for and you're going to have to go out of pocket. And it's why I educate how I do because I want people of all incomes to be able to get as much care as they can. And unfortunately, when you're stuck in the conventional world, they're very limited
Yeah.
because they aren't going to be able to justify running all the things that should be able to give you the full picture.
That's a great question. If someone is, all interested and has followed along with social media and all of these different influencers and thought leaders on all things integrative health, but I mean, if you go and get testing done, like one of the blood work, I got a full panel workup and without insurance, it was like over $1,000. I mean, I didn't
Mhm.
end up paying that much. I paid it like 100 or under 100, but that's how much they would have charged. I mean, it was insane. And this was at Quest.
Mhm.
I mean, that is not affordable, right? I mean, it's very fraudulent, frankly, of how much is being charged for a pretty simple, draw of blood. But I'd love to hear your perspective of someone on a budget trying to do this and do it well. How would you approach that with testing and then also with looking for the right integrative or holistic practitioner that's not going to just again rack up a bill with them and say, okay, you need all of this stuff and it's going to be $1,500.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm not sure I have the best answer for it, but
Yeah.
one thing I always encourage people to do is shop around for doctors.
Hmm.
Like, why wouldn't you? I
Yep.
talk to so many people that say they go to their doctor and their doctor basically either gaslights them or refuses things. And one thing that I always tell people to do, and it's maybe a little catty, but I tell people, okay, if your doctor refuses you a test, say, can you please add to my chart that you refuse that test for me? And then they may be more likely to add it so that they don't get in trouble.
Right.
But I try to give the list of all of the labs that we run. And I say, bring
Mhm.
this list to your doctor, get as much of it as you can. And I don't like using ChatGPT for analysis in terms of like recommendations, but you can tell ChatGPT one, to give you only research backed things and,
Mhm.
kind of guide it so it gives more accuracy. But two, it will give you more functional ranges. So
Mm.
ChatGPT has kind of its store of like what are more optimal functional ranges. And you can use that to understand, okay, if I'm not out of conventional, like what areas am I maybe out of optimal ranges?
Yeah.
And then I also typically recommend, and I have this on my page of like, if someone's going trying to get HRT, what are the synthetic versus bioidentical ingredients you need to look for? Because
Yep.
a lot of women think they're on estradiol and they're on norethisterone, right? Or
Yeah.
they're on some form of a progestin. And so I really try to educate to help people understand what to ask for. And then I tell people to lie
Mm.
about your symptoms. Lie about your symptoms so you can get as much blood work as possible. Like tell people that you're not sleeping, tell people that
Yeah.
you're almost depressed, you're dealing with
Yeah.
this horrible bloating and constipation, you aren't going to the bathroom but once a week.
Yeah.
Who cares? If it
Yeah.
means that you get the labs that you deserve to get, it's not hurting anyone. Like
Yeah.
you deserve those labs regardless. You're paying for an insurance that
Yeah.
barely covers the standards. So tell them that you're dealing with all the symptoms and you'll probably be more likely to be able to get some labs.
Yeah. Which is an unfortunate reality of where we're at. I mean, that's a whole other conversation. I do want to talk about HRT because there was recently, over the last few weeks, news out of HHS, right? Kind of dismantling the Women's Health Initiative, the big
Yeah.
study. The For those of you that don't know, the largest clinical study, taxpayer funded, of course, and really some poor results from it, frankly. And so you still have a lot of women. We had a electrician working at our house this week, and he was talking about his wife and how she doesn't want to do HRT because she thinks she's going to get cancer. I mean, it's still a thing, right? It's still
Uh,
totally a thing. So let's talk about HRT, and if you want to give your thoughts on the recent announcements and kind of the change of opinion from HHS as well.
yeah. I mean, I think that the WHI study was probably one of the biggest disservices done to women.
Yeah.
And they had retracted those statements, but it was never publicized. And so doctors still had fears, people still had fears,
Hmm.
until hopefully now things and tides start to turn a little bit. I am a huge proponent of HRT. I think that it is, I always tell women like, if your thyroid hormone stops working how it should, you replace it. And there's no I batted at that. But biologically, we lose hormone levels that are kind of our like shield of, honor. It's our battle against the world. We lose the ability to have this armor. And we expect to just go on suffering the rest of our life and see an increase in cardiovascular risk and dementia and Alzheimer risk and metabolic risk. Like there's so many things that get impacted when we lose our hormones, our mind, like women go crazy in perimenopause and menopause. And yet we're told suffer through it. Like it's part of aging to not feel like yourself, not look like yourself. And I just completely disagree. I think that we have the technology, we have the beautiful science that has provided us with something that our cells literally experience like our actual hormones.
Hmm.
Why don't we use it? Like, why suffer?
Yeah.
Why go through that when you have something that can help you feel like yourself again? With that same breath, you have to live the lifestyle.
Hmm.
I talk to so many women that go on hormone replacement therapy and feel worse. And I ask them,
Hmm.
what is your metabolic markers looking like? What's your gut health like? What is your inflammation level like? Because so many people expect for it to be this golden ticket and this silver bullet, but it is what environment is it going into? Hormones are amplifiers, they are messengers. And so if it's a horrible environment that it's going into, that's a sick, unhealthy environment that's not being taken care of, it's going to make that environment worse.
Hmm.
They are optimizers in a good environment. If you are taking care of yourself, if you're eating healthy, you're exercising, you're watching all of your health markers, hormones can be amazing and they can make you feel that much better. But a lot of women, I think, shortcut and try to use them as the only thing when they don't address everything else. And so I have very strong opinions about what I feel should be done before going on hormones, or alongside going on hormones. I'm not going to deny anyone hormones. I don't think that that's right. But I truly do believe that they can be life changing for people when they are brought into the right environment. And why would we deny women that?
That's something that's really under discussed. I mean, it's an obvious point, but frankly, I've had a lot of discussions about HRT with different guests on the podcast and everything else. And it's something that hasn't been discussed of the lifestyle changes and commitment needed alongside HRT. So are you just talking about kind of, again, uh, food, diet, quality of when you're eating, all of the exercise, kind of the normal things, or is there other lifestyle intervention that's really important while you're on HRT?
So I have some opinions about how HRT should be introduced.
Mhm.
I have kind of a unique perspective of I was never trained a certain way on hormones.
Yeah.
I'm not a medically licensed professional,
Mhm.
but one benefit that I have is I've seen so many women come to our practice on different types of hormones and
Interesting.
women that went onto them not healthy and dealing with a lot of other symptoms, and then women that we've had go on them after we've done work with them and how amazing they can be. And
Mm.
so I think I have kind of a unique perspective of like forms of hormones that I find on average tend to do a lot better as introductory pieces because
Mhm.
every woman experiences their hormones differently. And we know that. Like every female is different. And
Yep.
so I have seen pellets cause a lot of issues with women. I have
Mm.
seen things like an estradiol patch be a lot more of a gentle approach for most women introducing estrogen. Oral progesterone can be very reactive for some women, depending on how their neurosteroids are responding in the body, depending on their gut health, their liver detoxification abilities, their histamine levels, right?
Yep.
And so I think that hormones need to be introduced one at a time. I
Mm.
typically recommend going with progesterone first because it tends to be the first one that goes offline. I think estrogen has to be treaded with carefully because of how potent it can feel for many women, and how some women do not clear and detoxify estrogen very well. And
Mm.
then testosterone's kind of like a as needed, right? Some women need it sooner, other women may not need it as much. Kind of depends on their health history, their birth control history, all of those things that can affect it. So the first thing that I always say is like, I don't like introducing more than one at a time, even if it's a few weeks in between it, because some people have really strong responses to hormones. And then I also typically recommend trying to start at a lower dose
Mm.
because again, example of a pellet, you get a pellet introduced, it's an extremely high dose. You cannot take that out for 3 months. You basically have to live with whatever side effects come with it. If you decided to go straight into a super high dose of hormone when your body hasn't smelled hormones for maybe years,
Yeah.
you're going to probably have some negative side effects. And so I like things that can be easily manipulated quickly if we notice that the body may not be responding very well to it, or we can change forms, right? I also think you need to be lifting weights, you need to be walking and moving your body, hydrating, you need to be eating healthy, you need to be pooping daily and making
Mm.
sure that your body is detoxifying and clearing things. And I personally think that going on hormones, you need to keep in some type of detoxification support because you're
Mm.
basically adding in exogenous things that your body now has to extra job of breaking down, clearing, and removing. And so I personally put most of my female clients that are on HRT on some type of calcium D-glucarate or DIM blend or something that isn't going to lower estrogen, but is just going to help estrogen clear down the proper pathways, sulforaphane, antioxidants that are going to help it get out of the body how it's supposed to so it doesn't recirculate and create more of the negative side effects. So those are kind of the standard approaches I take to HRT.
And then there's this whole other discussion, and I'd love to hear kind of your take on why we even have synthetic hormones, right? Because there's bioidentical hormones and synthetic hormones. So, and that's very confusing as well, right? And if you don't
Watch the
know,
money.
back to your point, there you go, if back to your point of if you don't know what to ask for, you could walk out, of the doctor with some synthetic hormone that you start taking. So walk us through the difference between synthetic and bioidentical hormones, and what women should be looking for.
Yeah. So here's the thing that you need to understand, and this is the same problem we're running into with peptides,
Hmm.
is the FDA and the drug companies have to patent something to be able to market it and make money on it. You cannot patent hormones. It is a naturally occurring thing in the body, right?
Hmm.
Same thing with peptides, naturally occurring chains of amino acids. You can't you to be able to market it as a drug and sell it and make money off of it, it has to change in some way. There has to be
Hmm.
a chemical difference, right? And so that's ultimately where synthetic hormones arise, right? It's a different thing. Your cells experience it differently. At the cell level, bioidentical hormones, when we're talking estradiol,
Hmm.
estriol, or sometimes like a bi-S, like a combination. Tri-S is a lot less common nowadays, which is good. We don't really want more estrone, but estradiol, estriol, or a biest. Testosterone, cypionate, is typically the most common one. And then progesterone.
Mhm.
Progesterone's brand name is Prometrium. So you can get progesterone bioidentical from your OBGYN, typically known as Prometrium. The one downside is obviously if it's not coming from a compounding pharmacy, you only have certain options for doses. So it
Mhm.
starts at 100 milligrams and then the next jump is 200 milligrams. So it's typically covered under insurance. Sometimes you have to argue with certain doctors around like the need post menopause because of the uterus and not, not having post hysterectomy or partial hysterectomy or beyond menopause. You don't need the ovaries and the uterus anymore, so you don't need to support them, which is complete absolute BS. It makes me so angry. Like so many receptors in your body need progesterone,
Yeah.
but another discussion for another day. And so you want to be looking for the actual ingredients of those hormones. Anything other than that, progestins, norethistone, progesterone, all of those are synthetic forms. Your cells don't experience them like your hormones. And so in turn, a lot of times we see, so progestins are technically derived from testosterone.
Right.
And so they're more of an androgenic nature for the female body, which is why a lot of females that go on progestins end up with inflammation. They end up with sometimes hair loss. They end up with
Mhm.
acne. They end up with irritability or rage because a lot of people experience them as the androgenic nature that they are. And so we've seen this in research too, like being on a progestin at a baseline leaves females at a higher CRP level, so a higher inflammatory level. It also stimulates the immune system. And so if you're an autoimmune client or anything like that, you got to be careful with birth controls because it's kind of like playing roulette with what you're
Yeah.
putting in your body. So it's just different in terms of how the body experiences it. And in turn, the synthetic variations of hormones tend to be a lot more inflammatory in nature to the system. And you just don't get the same benefits from them.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about all of this is that it certainly seems like there is a younger and younger age, right? Range that women are going through menopause. Now, obviously, we know this word perimenopause. I'm curious your take. Is this just marketing and a market opportunity that now we can market menopause to women in their late 30s? Is there biological truth to what we're seeing that women really are starting to go into perimenopause? Um, Again, for women that are already stressed and putting pressure on themselves in their 30s, should they be concerned about this? I mean, it seems like, unfortunately, it seems like it's kind of one more thing that women are like, "Oh, great. Now I've got to deal with this." So, be curious about your take and what you're seeing with your clients.
Yeah, I think it has a lot of aspects to it. I think awareness obviously is one of the pieces. People are
Yeah.
just more aware of what the symptoms are that come with perimenopause, like the night sweats, the hot flashes, the weight gain,
Mhm.
the brain fog, and kind of the change in mood, libido, all of those things. I think the other big thing that just can't be ignored is our exposure to stress and toxicity in the world.
Yeah.
It's just it is what it is. Being healthy is a lot harder these days than it used to be. It's much more of like a conscious effort that needs to happen. And so when we're exposed to chronic stress, sex hormones are kind of a nice to have for the body. It's
Mhm.
not really a priority, right? And so when you're chronically stressed, sex hormones tend to be the first thing that kind of go bye bye, and
Mhm.
progesterone tends to be the one that goes first. And so because of the other reasoning behind that is because of all of the estrogenic things we're exposed to and the xenoestrogens that we have in our environment now, females tend to have a much more estrogenic nature to themselves and estrogen dominance. And so hormones are all about relative comparison, not necessarily absolute levels. And so a lot of women experience very low progesterone symptoms. You're not
Mhm.
sleeping as well during the second half of your cycle. You're a lot more moody. You're dealing with a lot more PMS symptoms, right? Maybe your cycles are getting a lot shorter because without progesterone adequately holding the uterine lining in place, you shed it a lot sooner. So you're having a shorter second half of your cycle. All of those are signs typically of like leading into either perimenopause or just a low hormone state.
Yeah.
And stress, like I went through with my training, not having a period is basically a semi-menopausal state, even
Yeah.
if you're in your 20s, right? Your
Yeah.
body is basically experience what it experiences during menopause. And it's not healthy to not have hormones for a long
Yeah.
time. It's actually very unhealthy to not have hormone levels that are robust and healthy and cycling in the right way. And so I think that it's kind of a combination of females' stress levels and what we get exposed to in our world today are kind of pushing us into that area a lot sooner than it should. And then on top of that, there's more awareness around it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good perspective on it. And yeah, I mean, the awareness, there's market opportunity. There's a lot of people that are, jumping on that. I think by and large, there are though also very well-meaning companies that are just saying, okay, we're just going to provide a lot of great solutions and let the free market figure it out on what's a good product and what isn't. But the other thing that, I think is really interesting to talk about, and it's very hard, you had mentioned this earlier in the conversation, very hard to kind of, put your thumb on. But we got to talk about stress because women and stress, I mean, we're now seeing, leading numbers in infertility and all these different causes, downstream of stress and what it's doing to the body. But maybe just start with how stress impacts our hormone health, and then we can kind of evolve from there of what are some practical things that women can do.
Yeah. Oh, stress.
Yeah.
You can't escape it, right? And the thing that we need to understand is that females and the female body just responds differently to stress. So, estrogen in particular increases our glucocorticoid receptors. And so we experience cortisol at a more magnified level.
Mm,
And we are not necessarily more stressed than men, but our tissues respond more intensely to
mm,
cortisol changes. And then we also have a much more reactive HPA axis. And so we have higher ACTH responses. We have stronger cortisol rises under psychosocial stressors and psychological
mm,
stressors. We have a slower return to baseline. And so the stress hits harder, the peaks hit higher, and they come down slower, and the
mm.
crashes are crashier. And so we just experience it differently. And I think a lot of females try to manage the same level of stress that men do and think that it's okay. And like your body's obviously telling you that it's not okay. And so the fact that sex hormones are kind of your buffer to stress,
Mm,
when you are chronically stressed, your body is going to prioritize cortisol. It can't live without cortisol. Like without cortisol, you will die. You truly will die. And
mm,
so it can live without sex hormones though. And that is why under chronic stress, once you lose those sex hormone levels, and this is why people tend to survive for a little while in chronic stress
yeah.
environments, because they have some systems in place that will buffer for a while
Yeah.
and then they crash. And then it's like, I woke up and now I can't get out of bed. And my days feel like I'm moving through molasses and my brain doesn't work. I can't recall words. And it happens slowly, but people feel like it happens fast.
Mm,
And so, what I usually recommend is I recommend a couple things. One, you have to have awareness around it. And
yeah.
so, in your day, and this is what I have people do, I have them journal at the end of the day. What caused you stress today? Like, what, because there's eustress, there's good stress that can be adaptive stress, right?
Mhm.
Things like exercise can be a good stressor.
Yep.
Things like, working really hard on a project at work and getting it completed, that can be a good stressor, right?
Yep.
And then there's chronic stresses like you have a friend that calls you every day and wants to talk to you for an hour and it drains you mentally and emotionally, or you're in a job that you hate and every day you go to the job and all you can think about is how much you hate it. Like there are things that really drain people. And
Mm,
so the number one thing is you have to figure out where the actual stress, big stress, is coming from. Other things you need to test for. Some people don't realize like they have stealth gut infections, they have,
yeah.
they're living in mold and they're genetically sensitive to mold. They're dealing with, a viral activity. They're dealing with an immune system that's really overreactive. Like those things are what our practice is for. Like we dive deeper into
Yep.
what might be driving chronic stress that you cannot see, you know? Um, but the number one thing is awareness. And then I think about what can we do to build the resiliency? Are
Mm,
we eating enough food? Have we tracked our food? Do we even know how much we're eating? Or do we just think we're eating healthy and by, you know, by means to an end eating enough because we're eating healthy, we're eating 3 meals a day? Like, guess what? Healthy food isn't very high in calories. So a lot of
mm,
people that eat really healthy typically don't eat enough. And so I
mhm,
have people check, are you eating adequately? Are you watching maybe blood sugars, using a keto mojo and seeing does your body handle food very well throughout the day? So the food piece and then the movement piece. Are you
mm,
exercising and recovering? Because for me, the biggest signs that started to happen was I would work out really hard. And then the next day, I'd either be like debilitating sore for multiple days or I would be bloated. I would go up in
Interesting.
weight and it wouldn't come down. And so I could tell that exercise and the intense exercise that I was doing was no longer actually benefiting me. It was actually just adding another stressor to my plate. And so I really try to have people evaluate and look at their life of what's draining me on a day-to-day basis, and are the things that I think are healthy for me or benefiting me actually making things worse right now.
Yeah, and on that note, I mean, of like making sure you're getting enough calories, one thing I used to do all the time that now I'm looking back and it's like one of those silly things. All throughout my 20s, I would just skip meals. Like I wouldn't eat until dinner and I'm fasting until 4 or whatever. And it was like, and then you're kind of like psychologically like, oh, this is better anyways, because I'll not only have like, calorie deficit, I'll stay really thin, but then also on top of that, it's like, it's more convenient and then I'm just gonna go work all day, right? And do my workouts and everything else. Obviously very silly, thankfully learned, thankfully, my body was healthy enough to recover. I was able to get pregnant, all the things that I desired in life. The reality though is unfortunately so many women are going through infertility and are going through these journeys that are very difficult. And so I just want to talk about that of like making sure you're eating enough, but also what specifically happens to our hormones and our blood sugar, kind of the chaos that happens when you skip meals.
Yeah. So, we use fasting strategically in our practice.
Mhm.
And fasting can be a really powerful tool when someone's dealing with autoimmune, chronic inflammatory conditions. Like, it has its place and it's amazing.
Yep.
But we do not do it first. When a client comes into our practice, most of them are very stressed. Most of
Mhm.
them have already been eating super healthy and doing all the things right, and they still feel awful. And
Mhm.
so when your body cannot adapt to stressors anymore, like its stress load is maxed out. It is overflowing. It cannot handle things anymore. Unfortunately, what happens when you go too fast is your body actually tries to keep you in this sugar burning state because
Mhm.
sugar is the easiest fuel source for the body. It's what it wants to use. It's the easiest to break down. It's the easiest to keep the brain fueled. And so what happens is your liver starts actually pushing out more glucose and it starts trying to keep you in this sugar fed state. And so blood sugars actually rise when you fast. And I see this with clients a lot. We try to bring them into fasting and their bodies may not be ready for it. And so we'll have them track blood sugars because if someone's fasting, I want to make sure that it's working. I want to make
Yeah.
sure that we are not doing more damage to the body or catabolizing muscle in the process. And so some red flags that I always tell people is if you are trying to fast and your blood sugars are actually going up, that's not a good sign. That's a sign that your body's basically trying to keep you in that state. If you are exhausted when you're fasting, also not a good sign. If
Yeah.
you are running on stress hormone and caffeine, you may feel energized, but then as soon as you eat, you get bloated or you get exhausted afterwards. Also, signs that your body's not handling the food very well. Like food should be energizing. Your body temperature should go up after you eat. If you're freezing all the time, your body's in a place, thyroid hormone is down regulating, sex hormones are down regulating. Those things keep you warm. Females
Mhm.
that are cold all the time, body temperature is one of the easiest, cheapest ways to measure metabolic function. Wake up, test your body temperature. If it is under 97.2, you are suboptimal. Like you
Mhm.
are under functioning. Think of an engine that's idling, trying to keep energy around. That's what your body's doing. It's like, hey, I don't have excess energy to use. I'm slowing things down. I'm lowering body temperature. I'm lowering the number of times you blink in a day. I'm lowering brain function because it's just trying to keep the vital organs moving. And so that's typically what happens when people try to fast. You aren't adapting positively to it. It's not helping you lose weight. It's not helping your body clean up unhealthy cells. It's just stressing you out more, which then in turn stresses out all the sex hormone balances.
Well, that's such a good point because we've talked a lot on this show and otherwise, about like taking your body temperature to track ovulation, right? And all of those things naturally. That's a great point of just taking your body temperature as a general rule of thumb to see if, you're metabolically healthy as well. The other thing I wanted to kind of ask you in connection to hormones, this is something that unfortunately is super common with women is having these migraines and headaches that are hormone related. Um, and then going down, obviously, the rabbit hole. I know even a lot of women have had MRIs, right? So they're like seeing if there's something even, more structurally wrong. But a lot of this can be hormone related again. So would love to have you walk us through if you're having these symptoms of migraines and headaches, things that you should be aware of hormonally.
Yeah, you ever notice that men don't get migraines like women do?
Yeah.
It has a lot to do with estrogen. So almost every migraine or headache case ties back to estrogen levels, breakdown, and detoxification in some way.
Mm,
So there are some people that are genetically prone to migraines, and usually it's a combination of a little bit of cardiovascular risk that then creates more inflammation of the actual blood vessel walls, which impact obviously the vasodilation that can cause the tension. There's often a lot of cases a histamine factor. So
mm,
some women, histamine basically breaks down and detoxifies down the same pathways that our hormones and neurotransmitters do. And
mm,
so a lot of women that deal with anxiety, depression also tend to have histamine issues, tend to have estrogen detox issues. And so we think about kind of phase one, phase two detoxification, right? In phase one, your body has to take these hormones or neurotransmitters or histamine and unbind them so that they become water soluble to get through to phase two, where they rebind to a methyl group, a sulfur group. That's what we know as methylation, or the MTHFR. A lot of people think about, and that's where it either gets out via bile and the stool, or it gets out via urine and the kidneys. Hormones
mm,
and toxins have to clear via the stool. And so a lot of women, that system is not working properly, whether it have a little genetic component and or their liver is just burdened with
mm,
things. And so what happens is these hormones that should be clearing end up recirculating because phase one ends up being too backed up and phase
mm,
two can't keep up. And so this is where, B vitamins, things like that can be helpful, but you have to figure out where the levels of hormones are. Is it just a detoxification problem? Is it also a cardiovascular problem?
mm.
Electrolytes, obviously, hydration and electrolytes are huge when it comes to migraines and headaches. We also look at tension and muscle tension. I have a lot of women do like dead hangs because a lot of it can come, it kind of depends on where it's at. But if
Yeah,
it's more of like the back of the head, the upper traps tend to be a big piece and stress tends to play a role. But
yeah,
I look at all of those things. So, is there a histamine intolerance going on? Is there something that's dealing with? Do we need to lower histamine based foods? Do we need to bring in, DAO enzyme support? Do we need to somehow help support that phase one, phase two detoxification? But a lot of it comes back to estrogen because of how estrogen impacts our arterial wall and the vasodilation of the body. So,
mm,
tends to be the one big trigger for women because most women deal with migraines leading into their period or on their period when estrogen
yeah.
tends to be breaking down at higher rates, detoxifying at higher rates, and then coming back online. So I find that in my experience, at least, maybe it's just because I look at hormones all the time, estrogen tends to be the biggest player with migraines.
That's so helpful. I mean, there's so many women that are dealing with that, and then they're debilitating. I mean, there's a lot of it is like, can't go to work. It's terrible. Have to lay down, all of those things. Couple more questions here. This has been awesome, by the way. So thank you so much for your time. We've talked a little bit and danced around this, but obviously at the core of Daily Nori and what we do is focused on the gut microbiome, and we've been spending a lot of time focusing on the connection between the gut microbiome and hormones. So Becca, would love to hear your perspective of what you're seeing in your practice about the importance looking at all of these different women, helping them doing this testing, everything we've talked about. What is the importance in the role that the gut plays with hormone health and estrogen health?
Oh goodness. So I can't remember if this was offline, but we discussed obviously the estrobolome,
Yep.
and how the estrobolome shifts a lot leading
Mm,
into menopause. And so the other big thing that tends to happen in perimenopause is estrogen can kind of go on this wild roller coaster.
mm,
And unfortunately, when estrogen gets really high, it affects something called bile.
mm,
And bile is the main detoxification avenue for any type of hormone or toxin out of the body, mold, mycotoxins, all of those things. And bile, you want to kind of flow like water.
mm,
And when it starts flowing like peanut butter, things don't get out as well. And when estrogen goes up, bile becomes thicker. And
mm,
so, in my experience, I see probably the biggest issue with our clients, at least, is more of a liver gallbladder issue that then
mm,
turns into a gut issue. And so we see a lot of chronic constipation cases. We see a lot of people that deal with chronic bloating, liver gallbladder pain, or they've had their gallbladder removed. And unfortunately, when you don't have good bile flow, you are not going to detoxify hormones very well. And then hormones tend to recirculate. I always say hormones in their first pass in the body. So when your body creates hormones, you experience them how they should be experienced. Great. Hormones tend to be very helpful. When they don't detoxify and they kind of remetabolize into the body, that second pass of the hormones you don't want. They become more harmful. They become very anxious creating. They become a lot of estrogenic type symptoms, breast tenderness, PMS, headaches, things
mm,
like that. And so we need to make sure that hormones are clearing as they should. And bile plays a really large role in that. And I find, I don't know what you guys see, because I know you work with a lot of gut health. Like we
Yep.
see major bile and gallbladder issues more
Yep.
than anything.
And liver
So
issues, and it's
yeah,
all connected.
yeah,
We're seeing a lot more of that. There's a lot of research being done right now around how the gut microbiome impacts liver health. The two are obviously, um,
yes.
all of these systems are connected, right? There's
Mhm.
kind of these bidirectional relationships, but yeah, I mean, it's a very under discussed aspect of digestion in the gut microbiome, and we're seeing a lot more around it, which is so important because clearly there's a lot of issues going on with women's health right now, whether it be PCOS, endometriosis, these issues. Um, and the gut has a role to play, right? A super
Yeah,
important role to play. So,
yeah.
and then a couple of other questions. Would love to also, because you are a mom of two. How old are your kids now, Becca?
7 and 4.
Okay, so you've gone through it and you're in the thick of it, but hormonally for those moms out for the moms out there, hormonally, what are some of the most important things? And let's start with the front end of it because you mentioned your IVF journey and having missed your period for a few years and then going through IVF, but hormonally for a woman that's wanting to have children, right? Plans to have children, whether they're planning to have children in the next year or just kind of in the distant future, what are some of the most important things that women can do hormonally to prepare their bodies to have children?
Yeah, I mean, your gut health. We know we pass our gut health and our microbiome down to our kids.
Mm,
And I wish I would have known that more when I was pregnant, because when I was pregnant with my second, I definitely knew more than I know with my first. Um, but I definitely had a sugar craving when I was pregnant with my first.
mhm,
And he's the one that has a little bit more of the gut issues than my daughter does.
mm,
And I dealt with a little bit more of the constipation side of things when I was,
mm,
in my early part of all of this journey. And even now, it's still like I have to stay on top of my gut health because
mm,
it tends to regress a little bit easier. But we know we passed on the microbiome to our babies. And
mm,
when you are not healthy in terms of you maybe have leaky gut, you have a lot of food sensitivities, you're constipated, or you're dealing with diarrhea or back and forth, we know that those bacterial levels that are imbalanced can cause inflammation. They can cause, intolerances to food. They can cause all of these things, which then make the body immunologically more reactive.
mm.
And you don't want to go into a pregnancy without as optimal of health as possible, because a
Yeah.
pregnancy itself is really stressful on the body, right? And so I always look to gut health, and then I really try to manage stress, because something that I learned a while ago, and I probably should dig into like the true accuracy of it, but I learned it from someone that I trusted, and it's always kind of stuck with me, is the one gland that babies are born with that are pretty much full grown when they're born is the adrenal gland.
Mhm,
And mom can essentially feed off of the baby's adrenals when she is
mm,
pregnant with them, to where when your baby is born, they can be born with suboptimal adrenal function. And
mm.
it can cause more allergy development. It can cause more autoimmune probability. And so I really try to manage stress of a new mom, or, a wanting to be mom leading into the fertility journey, because that can also really impact the health of the baby.
Yeah.
And then I really try to find optimal balance between progesterone and estrogen, because estrogen is a really big player in miscarriages. We see a lot of times early miscarriages be due to estrogen dominance and
Mm,
lack of adequate progesterone. And so I love things like the Mira device or the Anido, to where you can track your daily levels of hormones and make sure that you're having a strong ovulation. You're not having too much of an estrogen spike. Your estrogen is clearing properly, right? So those are the big areas that I really look to, is like managing your stress, making sure that your gut health is in a pretty good spot, and watching your symptoms to give you guidance on that, and making sure you're eating a diverse diet so that
yeah.
the microbiome is diverse because of that. Maybe even utilizing a probiotic or a prebiotic to help infiltrate with as good of bacterial levels as possible. And then watching your hormone levels, because if you want to support a really healthy pregnancy, those need to be in balance.
Yeah, totally. Well said. Just as we wrap up here, one of the things that I try and do with all of these conversations is just because it is a female targeted audience, there's a lot of information. Women are already stressed. Now we're telling them all these other things that could be stressful. So we want to leave sort of on a positive note. And one of the beautiful things that I love about women too is that once you do tell them something and they do have information, they'll just go tackle it, and a lot of times that's why it's so encouraging to see people get better, right? And that's why this whole integrative and functional medicine, especially for women, has exploded, because women will find the solution, which is so, so empowering and great. But we don't want to stress them out more. And I just would love to hear if there's, stressed out mom, client, woman, that and they're kind of feeling a little hopeless just because they've tried all this stuff, nothing's working. What's the first thing that you would say to them as far as just how to flip the script, and what are some of those basic things that you could just say, hey, just baseline, start today with these couple of things, and they'll really make a big difference?
Yeah, that's a great question. So number one, I always try to bring is awareness. Like,
Mm,
pay attention to how you're feeling. And
mm,
are there trends to it? Can you keep a journal of how you feel on a day to day basis, given what you ate or what you experienced that day? Like, can you be your own detective with trying to figure some things out? Because sometimes things are a little bit more obvious than you think. You just haven't paid attention to them enough. And so, if you are experiencing some symptoms that seem random, I tell people to try to start tracking them on their own, and if they have been really chronic, then reach out to someone. That there's so many amazing practitioners out there and people that want to help out there. I really do encourage people to go and, get a lab review, go and get blood work with someone that's going to look critically at it. And then on more of like an application basis on a day-to-day thing, if you are someone that tends to be the type A, the type go, 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 you don't have time to slow down, less is more for those people.
mm,
And it was a really hard thing for me, it was exercise. Like, I had
mm,
always done the most when it came to exercise. And I could never accomplish a body composition that I truly was happy with doing that.
mm,
And when I now look back at the years that I spent battling, going back and forth of like, no, maybe if I just eat more and if I sleep a little bit more, I can still work out 6 days a week. Like, I can still do the hit and, lift super heavy and every time I went and tried to do it, my body would just get more swollen. And so it took me a while, but now I work out 2 to 3 days a week. I work out for 45 minutes and I have the best body composition I've ever had in my life. And so
yep,
less tends to be more. And then the last piece that I always like to give is like an easy little tip for gut microbiome health: change your food on a weekly basis. And don't feel like you have to change it completely. If you normally eat strawberries and blueberries, maybe next week go to grapes and apples, and the week after go to kiwi and banana. And with
yep,
vegetables, if you always eat asparagus and zucchini, like next week, let's bring in mushrooms and eggplant, or like swap the same food groups for slightly different things to bring in different types and experiment with yourself. You should not follow the same diet all day, every day. Your body is meant to go through seasons of different types of eating. In the summertime, we're actually meant to eat a little bit lighter and with a little bit less carbs, more fats. In the wintertime, your body actually wants heartier foods. It's meant to go through that. So, like, try to change your diet with either the seasons or start with just the weeks and do slightly different foods to keep diverse gut microbiome and to see, do I feel better eating a certain way versus another way? Just because I was told to eat one way doesn't mean that's necessarily what your body might feel best doing right now. So I always encourage people to experiment, and that's an easy way that they can kind of start experimenting.
that's great. The final question, this just came up, and I want to make sure I address it, because especially heading into a new year and a lot of, inevitably resolution season, even though it's kind of comical sometimes to talk about. Um, One of the things that has changed my health radically, even with newborn kids, toddlers, I know it's all hard, has been sleep and prioritizing sleep, and then sleep hygiene, meaning like wearing red light glasses and anything and everything we can do environmentally to focus on sleep, making that a priority, which it just hadn't been in the past, because again, you kind of operate on this high intensity type A, oh, I can sleep for 4 or 5 6 hours and I'll catch up on sleep on the weekend. um, let's just, if you don't mind, explain the importance of the connection between sleep and your hormones, and how, especially as women, we need more sleep than men. I mean, we need to sleep.
Yeah.
I think that would be just the final, last, and best question, because that's one thing that I've been kind of on my soapbox about, within my personal circles, of just like, hey, are you sleeping, to my friends?
Yeah.
As
Yeah.
I
I
once you
I'm
start sleeping, you realize how, whoa, this is. I was really running on kind of fight or flight, right?
Oh,
Without
completely.
it.
So I always kind of use this as like the how to help people understand sleep. I would
Yeah.
rather someone get 8 hours of sleep and eat cheeseburgers and processed foods than someone get 5 hours of sleep and eat healthy. I would. It is that important. And for females, if you can get to bed earlier, because I think a lot of females I talk to at least feel like after their kids are put down at night is like their only time to themselves.
Yep.
The amount of sleep that you get before midnight is the deep sleep that you get.
Mhm.
You get more deep sleep before midnight. And so it counts almost double. Like you get
Mhm.
more restful sleep if you go to bed earlier around 8:39, 9:30 than if you go to bed at 11 and sleep until 8. Like it's just better sleep. And so the times need to be consistent. Your body
Mhm.
needs to know the schedule that you're on. And I personally think most people should be in bed by 9:30,
Yeah.
maybe 10 at the latest, and then wake up 5:30, 6 with the sun
Mhm.
and consistently, even on the weekends. Like try not to vary by more than 30 minutes both directions. Your body really needs the routine. Your body also is meant to run with the sun. And so
Mhm.
if you can get sunlight, if you don't have sunlight at 5:30 in the morning, I live in Chicago, it's awful.
Yeah.
I have my 10,000 lux light that's $35 on Amazon that I happy light that I keep next to my computer. When I wake up at 5 a.m., I can put in my eyes.
Yeah.
I also try to encourage people to not have caffeine until about 7 or 8, 9 a.m. because you are blunting or artificially creating a cortisol response earlier than it
Mhm.
should be. And so then you get a crash earlier than it should be, which is why at 2 p.m. you crash. And so
Yeah.
there's a couple little habits. Yes, I love orange blocking glasses or blue blocking classes.
Mhm.
Those are great at nighttime. Dim the lights, bring the temperature down in your house. Your body is meant to be at a colder temperature at night. It helps you
Yeah.
sleep better. Try not to drink too much water before bed. Maybe bring in some electrolytes at bedtime to help stabilize adrenals a little bit overnight so cortisol doesn't spike. Maybe
Yeah.
have a small bedtime snack if you're waking up a lot at night to keep blood sugar a little bit more stable. And then sometimes I even put a little bit of vitamin C before bed, which can help
Mhm.
stabilize histamine because a lot of women wake up with histamine issues overnight. So
Mhm.
those are some things you can do, but the importance of sleep like cannot be understated.
Yeah.
It is so pivotal. And if you are not sleeping, I promise you, everything else in your body is going to become dysfunctional, starting with blood sugars, which then downstream affect hormones.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That was exactly the communication that well said that I wanted to get out there and just I don't know if there's one thing that you're taking into the new year and just one habit to start with, to boil it down hormone wise and otherwise. If you're not sleeping well, that's probably the first place to start. I mean, to Becca's point, it's critically important and arguably more important than diet. So thank you so much, Becca. This has been wonderful. And I know this is going to be a very helpful conversation for so many people. We'll certainly have you back on the show. Thank you. And the last thing is just if anyone is curious about where they can find you, where they can find your practice, where do you hang out?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram the most. I'm at the Hormone Queen, all one word. I talk a lot about hormones and perimenopause, but in our practice, we specialize in autoimmune, gut issues, chronic immune issues, mold, mycotoxins, weight loss resistance, all kinds of things. Basically, chronic issues for females. And our practice is FitMom Life. So our website is fitmom.co, C-O, fitmom.co. So that's where you can find out more about us. We also have a podcast, The Health Revival Show. So yeah, we're all over the place, but I'm mostly on Instagram. That's where, and I am the one in my DMs. So I always tell people I am
Awesome.
actually responding.
Good. Well, thank you, Becca. This has been awesome and I greatly appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to the Gut Check podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, leave us a comment below. Let us know what you think, like the episode, and share it with friends and family who may also benefit from learning about these important and educational health and wellness topics. You can find the Gut Check podcast on YouTube, also on Spotify, Instagram, and TikTok. The Gut Check podcast is brought to you by our team at Daily Nori. Daily Nori makes probiotic and prebiotic solutions accessible to all because good health starts with gut health. To learn more about Daily Nori, please go to www.dailynori.com. Thank you.